Hey, what's up, family? Hope you're having a good day. If not, you know what I always say, that the worst is behind you, and be mindful of the thoughts and intentions that you're currently holding, because they actively shape your reality in the existence that you're experiencing right now. So, have to bear with me a little bit. My gimbal died as I was walking through the forest there, and just had a couple different ideas and messages I wanted to get out. So just kind of going a little bit old school with holding the camera there, so hopefully you guys don't mind. But one thing I wanted to talk about today is, in a previous video, I did show my new mascot, or the new channel mascot, the cat that I recently adopted. Her name is IxChel. So, it's named after the Mayan goddess of fertility and nurturing and family. And I went through a couple different names, and for whatever reason, well, not for whatever reason, but as I was going through various names, my body just jumped for joy whenever I came across that name and thought about giving to her. But her original name was Roxy, which has a very interesting connotation to it that stopped me in my tracks whenever I saw her and made me a little apprehensive as far as adopting her. But like spirit does in spirit ways, arrange things to where she was basically given to me. And at a certain point in time, I've learned that when certain things unfold, or when things unfold in a certain manner, especially ones that you can't explain, that there's a reason behind it, and it's best not to resist it and not to ignore it. So growing up, I've never had pets. I had like a goldfish one time when I was really young, the type that you get from like the county fairs and stuff. So unfortunately, I came home one day and he had jumped out of the fish bowl and was laying on the countertop, and obviously was no longer with us. So, as a young child, I was definitely sad, but, I guess you can call it maybe jaded from that instance, and never got a pet from there. My parents weren't really big on dogs and big on cats. So never saw myself as a cat owner per se. I thought about maybe getting a dog one time, but the current apartments that I'm living in, they only allow cats. So I was like, okay. And it really started with my upstairs neighbor. She would go on vacation to go see her daughter, and she had a cat. And so she was asking one time, or talking about needing someone to cat sit for her. So me being the nice person that I am, it goes back to the whole savior complex that I was talking about in one of my other videos. And so I naturally volunteer. Well, hey, I would be happy to watch your cat while you're gone. So that way, that's one less thing you have to worry about. So fast forward, she goes on her trip. I go upstairs to watch the cat. The cat didn't really come out. So I would scoop the litter box out and make sure she had her food, make sure she had her water and everything. And so it was a couple of days I would go up there and she never would come out. So my neighbor had already told me that she was really shy and she really didn't come. She wasn't a big person when it came to coming around people that she didn't know. So I understood that chances are it wouldn't be that I would see her while I was there, but still held out hope. So after like the third day of going up there to scoop her litter box and to give her food, something just told me, just go sit down on the couch. So I was like, okay. So after doing my duties of cleaning the box out and going to sit on the couch, all of a sudden I looked up, and who did I see peeking around the corner of the couch? It was her. And so she came around the couch, she jumped up on the couch, and then basically she came right up to me, and I noticed that she was purring. And so, I don't know much about cats, but I have heard or am aware of cats purring, and it usually means that they're in a good mood or there's something comforting that's going on. But it's a reaction that they do when they're in a good mood. And so I was like, okay, the cat doesn't even really know me, or doesn't know me at all, but yet here she is coming up to me purring. And so I'm sitting there and she jumps up on the couch and she just basically keeps crossing my lap. So she'll I held my hands up, kind of like you say, when the cops say freeze, put your hands up, you know, so I put my hands up, and then basically as she would walk across my lap, she would go to my left side, she would put her head around my hand as if she wanted me to give her pets. So I would pet her with my left hand, and then she would move across my lap and go to the other side and do the same thing. She would start headbutting my hand. And so basically it went on for a while to where she was just crisscrossing my lap, wanting me to rub her cheeks and rub her head and under her chin and whatnot. So, you know, I mean, it made me feel good, and I was eating it up. And basically she just kept doing it back and forth and just purring and purring and purring. And eventually she stopped and just like laid on the side of me, but then she put her head resting it on my leg and just basically laid there for a minute. So, you know, I took some pictures and sent it to my neighbor, and I was like, hey, I think your cat really likes me, you know, because of X, Y, and Z. Which was surprising because, like I said, the neighbor had said that she didn't really take too kindly to people because she was a former stray. And so anybody that's dealt with cats, especially knowing when they're coming from a stray, they can be very skittish, I guess you can say, when it comes to interacting with people, interacting with human beings. So before that, I had recognized that it seemed to be the deity Bastet was calling out to me, or had been calling out to me in various forms. But I always thought it was weird because I didn't have a connection to cats that I really understood. But people were always telling me that I had really good energy and that they could feel something different when I was around. So I didn't think anything of it. I took a trip. My first solo trip by myself, just for myself, was to Asheville, North Carolina. And while I was there, I had never visited any mystical shops whatsoever. And so I just figured I was in that location, which is a big mystical location. If anybody knows anything about Asheville, North Carolina, or not Asheville, why do I keep saying Asheville, North Carolina? It's Ashland, North Carolina. So, you know, a couple of years ago, they had a big hurricane or tornado that went through there. So while I was in Asheville, North Carolina, I decided to go to a mystical shop. And it just so happened that the one that I went to, unbeknownst to me, was a place, I can't remember exactly the name of it, but it was associated with black cats. And so when I got there, lo and behold, it turned out to be basically a temple or shrine to Bastet. And so I'm thinking to myself, okay. And then while I was in Asheville, North Carolina, there was an Egyptian display on King Tut, Tutankhamun. So there were a lot of synchronicities. You know, Bastet obviously is from the Egyptian civilization during that time frame. And so there were just a lot of things that lined up that seemed to point me in that direction. And cat sitting for my neighbor's cat and seeing her response to me, knowing that I've had instances in my life where it seemed that Bastet was calling out to me. The different videos on YouTube when I was looking at as far as working with Bastet all talked about getting a cat as kind of the first step of working with her. So I was like, okay, maybe this is the universe's way of showing me that I need to get a cat. So lo and behold, through various experiences, I told my neighbor one day that I had made a decision that I was going to get a cat. So notice she was stoked, and she said that she wanted to go with me whenever I went through the experience. So I went online to the various adoption agencies looking through cats and looking through various names, and there was a cat on the list that I saw named Sage. So, you know, being on the spiritual journey, you know, burning sage as a way of cleansing my home and stuff, obviously that name naturally stuck out to me. So I immediately filled out the adoption forms for Sage, and after a little bit, I never heard anything back. After about a week or so, I never heard anything back. So I looked on the website for the adoption place, and they stated that there's a local PetSmart that they have adoption events at. So I found out that one Saturday that they were actually on Saturdays when they have the event, but it was a Sunday that we wound up being out at that location at the PetSmart where they were going to be at. So I went to that PetSmart and had no intentions on adopting a cat for that particular day. But as I was walking through and taking a look, it was, hey, how you doing? So I was just going through PetSmart and I'm just getting, litter boxes and the various items that you would need in order to bring a cat home. So I figured what I would do is I would prepare my environment for this cat. So that way, once I did finally make a decision, that my home would already be ready and would be set up and acclimated, especially since I have quite a few plants and some that is considered poisonous, I guess, or toxic to cats, like the Monstera plant. So fast forward, walking through the store, doing everything that was needed to kind of get the accessories for her. And I decided to go over to where the cats were. And lo and behold, the people that represented the company, they were still there. And so I got to talking with them and told them how I had filled out some adoption paperwork for this cat named Sage that was on the website. And they told me, oh, well, Sage isn't here. She's actually with a foster home. And that they gave me the telephone number that I could call to speak with the lady that was fostering her as far as bringing her home. Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure real quick that I'm going down the right one. All right, right trail. And so basically, so I got that, and my next door neighbor, she, got the information from me, and she called herself helping. So she went out and called the lady to find out and get some information about Sage. So while she was doing that, I was still inside the PetSmart and looking through the various cats that were there. And there was only about a handful that were there because they had already had their adoption event and it was over with. So as I was looking at the cages, anybody that has been to PetSmart and looked at cats will know that the cats that are there, they will have the names of the cats on the outside of the cage for you to see. And so as I was going through and looking at the cage, I saw one that had the name Roxy on it. And it stopped me in my tracks because one thing I did leave out is prior to, I had watched a tarot video from this tarot reader that I had never seen before, had never really watched. And basically in his message, he was just like, soon you will be adopting a cat, and this cat will be one of your ancestors. And basically it's to kind of teach you how to commune and talk, with your ancestors, or talking basically with your pet. And I didn't think anything of it, obviously, like I said, in the moment. And so when I saw the name Roxy, it stopped me dead in my tracks. And I know I've said it a couple times, but the reason that it stopped me dead in my tracks is because I had an older brother that passed away in 2007. And guess what his mother's name was? His mother's name was Roxy. So I'm just like, okay. So here's this cat that has the name of my belated brother's mom. So I was like, okay, that's kind of one mark for something that seems a little bit odd, but hey, keep pushing along. And so the lady was telling me how basically the cat had been having a hard time acclimating to PetSmart. She didn't like it being there. She had gotten scratched a couple of times just trying to hold her and stuff. And that, I don't want to say that she was like a problem cat, but in essence, she was telling me a story to where like she was a problem cat. And so as we were standing there talking, she told me, but also that there was another couple that was coming to foster Roxy. So in my mind, Roxy was already spoken for. So I just chalked it up as an interesting synchronicity. So there was a black cat that was there, and knowing the stigma around black cats, I was like, oh, it'd be cool for me to adopt a black cat, And so I was like, I told her, I was like, well, hey, since Roxy well, I didn't even know, I didn't even have intention at that point to take Roxy. So I was like, well, hey, I like the black cat. I was like, you know, what's the chances of me fostering this particular one? Because she asked me, had I owned cats before or had a cat before? And I told her no, this is my first experience. So she said, well, maybe fostering will be a good first move just to make sure that things will work out first before you go the full adoption route. And oh, I did leave out that when I told her about me putting adoption paperwork in for Sage, she went in their system. And why did she come back and tell me that there's no paperwork in their system for me trying to adopt Sage whatsoever? So I thought that that was kind of weird because I knew that I did the paperwork. I put all my references in and everything. But here again, they didn't have the paperwork. It was as if the paperwork didn't exist. So chalk it up another hit to synchronicities, because of what's the chances of me running into them at this location, talking about Sage, coming across a cat that has the same name as my belated brother's mom, and them not having paperwork in the system for me trying to adopt a cat that I had initially wanted. So fast forward a little bit, the couple gets there who's supposed to be adopting Roxy, and they go in and, you know, I guess try to interact with her or whatnot. So that's when I told her, okay, well, I would like to move forward with trying to foster a cat. So there was the black cat that was in there, and I was like, I would like to try and foster this cat. I want to say the cat's name was Midnight. And so why did she tell me, oh, well, the couple that was going to foster Roxy has changed their mind, and they actually want to adopt Midnight, or they want to foster Midnight. So the cat that I was looking at was basically being fostered by somebody else. The couple that was going to take Roxy changed their minds to where now Roxy became available. So she was like, you know, Roxy, as we understand it, she really likes men. She really works best with men because the current foster parent that she's with is a man, and they seem to have a really good bond, but she doesn't get along with other cats. So she's best suited for a home that only has, that she would be the only cat in. So as far as I'm concerned, I was like, that's perfect, because, you know, it's just me in the home. There's no other cats, no other pets. So lo and behold, initially it seemed like I wasn't going to be able to foster Roxy because she was already spoken for. But here again, the universe rearranged things so that way I could wind up fostering her. So next thing I know, I'm walking over, picking out a carrier. I bring the carrier back over to the lady. She takes it out of the box, opens it up, goes in there and gets Roxy, you know, basically picks her up and puts her in the carrier. You know, she's hissing and trying to scratch her and stuff. And she puts her in there, and then she puts her in the carrier and sets her on the ground, you know, and I kind of kneel down and start talking to her, and I could see just her ears twitching and her head just on a pivot as she's constantly looking around. And I could just feel this sense of anxiety kind of coming over her. And so in that moment, you know, she definitely captured my heart. And the next thing I know, I'm walking out of a store, I'm walking out of PetSmart with all of these different accessories and a cat that was now fostering that has a name of my belated brother's mother who had also passed away. So initially I was trying to think to myself, you know, like, is this my brother's mom reincarnated, you know, as a cat? Or, you know, is this my brother that's reincarnated as a cat to help me in this journey, you know, that I'm going through right now? You know, a lot of things were going through my head in that moment because it's just the story itself, you know, just seemed unbelievable in that moment. And just the day before, or just a couple of hours before, I went to that mystical shop that I was telling you about, and guess what I bought? They had this statue of Bastet. Sorry, there's this fly that's flying around my head, and I normally have a hat on, but I don't have one on today, so it's a little bit too hot to be wearing hats out here. So, but about a couple of hours before, I went to this mystical shop, and they had this statue of Bastet that was kind of like looking over the store. And I saw it a few times when I went in there. It was a statue of Bastet in cat form. So as I was going in there on the past couple of times, past month or so, I had noticed it each and every time, and I felt this pull to buy it. But I always had other things that I wanted to buy in the moment. So this one particular day, I was just like, you know what, let me go ahead and just get it. So I got it and brought it home, put it up in the perch in the windowsill where there was a blanket that I put up for Roxy. So basically, like I said, walked into the store not expecting to adopt a cat. All of a sudden, here, fast forward to a couple hours later, I'm walking out of a PetSmart with all the accessories for a cat, as well as a cat named Roxy. So got her in the car, was driving home, and on the way home, it started lightly snowing, which was an interesting mix as well. So not exactly for sure what the symbology of it is in that moment. So I never really stopped to kind of really think about it until now, just talking about it and thinking about it in this moment. But I brought her home. I turned on the TVs where it's always, constantly playing like birds on the TV, so that way she can kind of run back and forth. She jumps up in front of the TVs now and looks at the birds. She's doing so much now to where she still is a little bit skittish from time to time, but for the most part, within a week or so, she came out. She crawled up on the bed and she actually slept on my chest, which is interesting, having a 9-10 pound cat sleeping on your chest throughout the night. But it really made me feel good. And the way that I'm seeing it in this moment right now is she's helping me unlock a part of my heart that I had locked away and didn't allow the world to experience because of the things that I had gone through and the disappointments that had happened in my life. And in essence, she was showing me, in this particular person, unfettered love, to where she will come up and rub up against my leg, and she'll lay out on the floor, to where she'll do like these crazy stretches to where she basically exposes her belly to me and will just lay there, and I'll try and talk to her like in baby voices. I call her mama all the time and just certain things, and she would just sit there and spin and just can tell that she's really a happy cat. And it makes me feel good because I've been pouring into people for so long, trying to make them happy, but it was an unequal give and take, to where I was giving 90% and I wasn't even barely getting 10%, barely even 1% back. So it was nice to be able to finally pour into someone who was pouring back into me as well. So that's the story between how Roxy, or as I say, IxChel now, came into my life and we came into each other's existence. And once I got her, the theme of the movie Pretty Woman popped in my head. And so it's not, I'm sure I had watched the movie before, but I was very much aware of it and kind of the thesis behind the movie. A rich man kind of picking up someone that he typically wouldn't have because of her line of work, and then how they basically came into each other's lives and reshaped each other's lives and how they viewed the world. And I will say that's exactly what IxChel did for me, is she allowed me to get back in touch with a piece of my heart and my expression, to be able to love someone fully and get loved back, and just to know what that is. So, it's not, I was doing, in my mind, a great job of being on my own, being by myself, nurturing myself and loving myself. But it's a great relationship and a great feeling to have her in my life, and I'm grateful to Spirit for crossing our paths, and for the things that I thought was aligned with me. I'm grateful and thankful for them not working out for me, because it allowed me to come in contact with her and to become a friend with her. So, but hey, how's it going? Hey, what's up, buddy? So, it's definitely an experience. But just wanted to kind of share that story. So I know I mentioned a couple times in previous videos that you guys had seen her in those videos, and that I had an interesting story as far as how our paths crossed and how our lives came in contact with one another. And in essence, that's the story. So, you know, I adopted her I picked her up from PetSmart on February 22nd. And then around March 22nd, they reached out to me and asked me if I would like to fully adopt her. And I went ahead and fully adopted her and took her and paid the money and stuff. And now she and I are thick as thieves and stuff. So definitely realized I need to get me a bigger bed, because she likes to sleep at my feet. But the bed isn't really big enough that she can sleep comfortably at my feet without me moving throughout the night and potentially inadvertently kicking her and stuff. So I do like whenever she sleeps in the bed, you know, with me, or at least on the bed and stuff. So that's something that I'm prioritizing and setting up for her. But just the fact that she seems to love this new home that I provided for her and this environment, you know, it really warms my heart. She had some kind of irritation in her ear that required me to take her to the vet. The vet was about 20 minutes away. So I had been training her to go into her carrier. And so before we went to the vet, I picked her up and put her in the carrier, and she gave me like a little bit of hiss, but she didn't give me any trouble with going into the carrier like I kind of expected, which, you know, I'm totally thankful for. But on the way to the vet, she just kept crying, you know, letting out like kind of like these sad wails that really tore at my heartstrings and stuff. And so, but the thing is on the way home, once we left the vet, she didn't cry at all. She didn't make any noises whatsoever. And that just told me, or at least made me feel like, that she thought that I was basically taking her back to PetSmart, or the same loop that she was in when she was in foster, of going from the home to the PetSmart and then back to the home, or going maybe to some stranger's house. And as soon as she gets comfortable, she's ripped out of that environment and taken back to an environment that she didn't want to be in. So it pulled on my heartstrings with her doing that, because one, it made me feel good in the sense that I provided such a warm and loving home for her that she didn't want to go. But then once she realized she didn't want to leave, she didn't want me to get rid of, or what she thought that maybe I was getting rid of her. But it's almost like once she realized that she was just going to the vet to get checked up, she realized that there was no danger and nothing to be afraid of. So once the way back home, like I said, she didn't cry at all like she did going there. And it just made me feel good, just because, like I said before, you know, we do things a lot of times, especially when you're alone. I don't say alone, but when you're by yourself, you show up in a world in a way that we can't see how we're being perceived by other people. It's not until other people comment on the way that we're behaving, or the way that we're acting, or how we carry ourselves, that we really realize how others view us and how we're showing up in the world. And I would say that perspective really shifted once I adopted her and have been with her, because she's really showing me, you know, that I really am a good pet parent. You know, I would make a good parent to a child. You know, I do know how to create and foster a loving and nurturing environment. And she's also showing me how to further unlock parts of my heart that I didn't even know were locked up and still behind lock and key. So for that, I will say thank you, Spirit, you know, for arranging things and putting her in my path as well as me in her path, so that way we can help unlock each other and live this life together. So I never really understood the connection between people who own pets, and I don't even want to say own pets, but people who have pet friends, you know, but I definitely understand it now in that dynamic. So, because I definitely, you know, love her with my entire heart, and she's a great, you know, she's a great little person, little furry person. So, you know, still learning the dynamics, you know, because her personality is just like mine, which is crazy because, you know, I love affection, but I only love affection to a certain degree. You know, it's like somebody can love on me and stuff, but once it's, you know, after like 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, I mean, I'm not being specific as far as the time frame, but it's just like after a certain period of time, it's just like, you know, something just goes on inside of me, and I just need to kind of like break free a little bit. And so that's exactly the dynamic she is. She'll come up to me purring and want me to rub on her chin and whatnot. But I learned, just like with me, she's got a certain threshold that happens in a split second to where she's loving and affection. But once she gets overstimulated, you know, she'll give me a nibble on my hand. The first time it scared the crap out of me, you know, because I thought she was biting me, but it was just that natural reaction from her. And so, you know, I've learned that I can love her and pet her, but there's a limit, you know, basically just like with me. So it's teaching me how to overcome that limitation with myself, as far as looking at why I only have a threshold for a certain amount of touch before it becomes uncomfortable. And so that's just one aspect that I've realized that she's mirroring back to me. I shared an experience in another video about something else that she's mirrored back to me. So it's been a very surprising but wonderful experience with having her in my world now, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. So no lesson or anything whatsoever. In this video, it's just sharing my experience with adopting a cat that I never thought that I would own or would be a cat dad, but has been very rewarding in my life. So, you know, hopefully you guys all have someone in your life similar that brings you joy, and that shows you that there are things in this world that outside of people that can teach you lessons and can help you recognize your full potential. So, you know, if you don't have a pet, you know, I would definitely encourage you to take a look at one, or at least be curious about it, because you never know where it may take you and where that journey ultimately leads you to. So I'll leave it there, family. Like I said, as always, just know that I love you. I love you. I love you so much. And I'm going to finish enjoying the rest of this walk, okay? Have a great day.